So my name is Krupa Srivatsan. I'm a Senior Director of Product Marketing at Infoblox, focused on our cybersecurity solutions, especially around protective DNS. And, so this includes everything we do from a DNS-based threat detection and blocking perspective, threat intelligence, ecosystem integrations with other security vendors. So there's a lot of interesting things happening at Infoblox, and I focus on those security aspects.
Great. So traditional cybersecurity relies on detect and respond, waiting for someone else to be the first victim. What's fundamentally different about Infoblox's preemptive approach, and why does this shift matter now?
Yeah, absolutely. So let's take a step back and see, how traditional detect and response solutions work. Uh, these solutions, stuff that these are technologies that customers have implemented as part of defense in depth. But traditionally, the detect and response solutions relies on someone else being a patient zero. Someone else gets infected with that first piece of malware, um, and the industry then, tries to learn more about that malware once that initial organization gets affected. And then they try to figure out how it works, and then the rest of the industry starts to block that attack. But the problem with that is there's always a patient zero, the first organization that gets impacted. And the reason that model no longer works is because today threat actors are not just hashing out same old malware variants, they are crafting new malware, which are more sophisticated and stealthy, and they actually use AI to actually tailor that malware to a specific industry, a specific vertical, a specific company, and even a specific employee, right? So you see this plethora of single-use malware, if you will, right? So what that means is the chance that an organization is going to become patient zero just skyrockets significantly because, like I said before, the threat actors don't need any coding expertise. They can just use AI to create these new and new malware variants at a large scale.
Got it. So there could be a lot of patient zeros, and that's not a good thing.
Exactly. And I will say that unlike other security tools, right, if you're using DNS, you can actually track threat actor infrastructure even before that infrastructure is weaponized. So what do I mean by that, right? You generally, when attackers launch campaigns, they need some domains. They need to set up domains, weaponize those domains, and then launch the malware attacks, right? And that's what the actors do. And so if you're tracking those domains and the infrastructure that they're setting up, even before they're weaponized, we don't really care if they're using AI to generate malware variants, you're just blocking the DNS infrastructure. This is similar to, like, if you think about it, a dealer versus cartel approach. If you're going after individual drug dealers on the street, or so, the individual malware variants, you're never going to catch them all, right? But if you're going after the cartels, the threat actors, and their supply chain infrastructure and tools, then you're catching it early, you're blocking that choke point, and it's a better way, a more effective way to eliminating the problem, right? So it doesn't matter if attackers are using AI, but you're now going to the source. And one of the things that DNS can help with is it can, if you use DNS-based threat intel, you're tracking all these infrastructure out there, and you're not going after digital variants. And DNS can also be this inside-out proactive shield. It can be that first point of detection. Every time there's a attack, a ransomware, CNC lookup, or data exfiltration, there's always a DNS query that goes out to a domain. And so if you're blocking that DNS query to a high risk or a malicious domain, you're blocking threats at that first point of detection. So DNS can be that first point of detection for most cyber attacks, if not all cyber attacks. The other thing is you are actually blocking attacks before the rest of the traditional detect and response tools can see it. So you're reducing the load on those other security tools, And you're protecting your entire infrastructure. You're protecting your entire network, not just on-premises environments and data centers, but you can protect your cloud workloads, your remote users, all of it.
Got it. Thank you. So looking at your latest research, I believe it was revealed that a quarter of all newly observed domains are malicious or suspicious. And Infoblox blocks north of 80% of threats before impact with almost a 70-day head start. So how do these findings demonstrate the real world impact of getting ahead of attackers?
Yes, so like you said, we just published a new DNS landscape report. And if you look at some of the stats there, you will see that, there are obviously a lot of identified actors that we've published information about. The stat you mentioned, about a quarter of all newly observed domains are malicious or suspicious, that 25.1%. So that's a big number, right? You've got a lot of these new domains that are getting registered. And if a quarter of them are owned by threat actors for, malicious purposes, that's scary, right? That's a pretty big number. So you want to make sure that you are, blocking these new domains that threat actors are registering, right, on a regular basis. Yes, we do block, for our customers, we do block 82% of threats before that first DNS query goes out to any of these malicious or suspicious domains. And on an average, we do it 68 days ahead of attacks. And I can show you later kind of how that looks like. But the impact, right, the impact of blocking these threats at the source as early as possible before that DNS query goes out to the malicious domain, the impact is that customers are now getting preemptive protection, right? We are not allowing, for example, ransomware to get downloaded. If you remember last year or the year before, there was a particular ransomware variant called Ransom Hub. It was targeting healthcare organizations, and we had the domains associated with that ransomware attack much earlier than the other threat intel sources did. So we were actually protecting our customers even before the attacks had launched, right? So that's a big impact for customers. They want the preemptive protection. They don't want to wait until somebody gets infected, right? So that's a big impact. And sometimes the 82% number is even higher. Sometimes for individual customers, we block even 95% of the time that first DNS query that goes out to a malicious or a high-risk domain. And when you're blocking a DNS, the other important thing to note is there is a much less malicious traffic, like I said before, that goes to other detect and response solutions. There's also fewer alerts to the SIM, right? Because you don't have all of these other tools also catching these threats and sending it to the SIM. Because they're not even seeing it because DNS blocked those threats. So there's a cost efficiency that customers could get here, right? They can reduce costs of their SIM. If there's less alerts to the SIM, they're paying less to their SIM vendor. There's efficiency benefits. Now, the SOC teams are not chasing duplicate alerts. We all know SOC teams have some, fatigue, alert fatigue. So when you're blocking a DNS, you're improving their SOC productivity as well. And this report is available to get, people can download it on our website, but there's a wealth of information on the landscape and the threat actors.
Great. So with the new NIST guidelines emphasizing DNS layer prevention, how does Infoblox see its role in shaping the industry standards across the broader security ecosystem?
Yeah, so this is a huge deal, right? NIST actually a couple of months ago, they published SB 800-81 guidelines. They put it out for public comment. They're going to publish it pretty soon for consumption. They actually included DNS in a few ways, right? They talk about three pillars of DNS layer protection and prevention, so to speak. One is employing protective DNS, which is what we've been talking about till now, using DNS as a security control point to block access to high-risk domains and to malicious domains, right? That's all about the protective DNS capabilities. They also talk about protecting the DNS protocol, right? Think about using encryption. Think about DNSSEC. There are a lot of elements on the protocol side of the house which can also make sure that your DNS is secure. And then third thing is protecting the DNS server itself. When, let's say, there is a DNS-based DDoS attack, for example, a DDoS attack could slow down a DNS server or cause it to crash. And so, NIST recommends that organizations do all of these things to really improve their overall security against cyber attacks and also make sure that the DNS is resilient. And you can see the quote from there that talks about how DNS servers can provide that early insight into connections and data flow so that you're preventing these incidents before the other systems. So this is a great example of market validation, right, for using DNS as a security control point.
Speaking of market validation, what other frameworks do you know of that indicate that DNS security should be a security-focused control point?
Yeah, so NIST is one framework, and if you look at, there are many other regulations that actually take a page out of the NIST framework, right? They use NIST as the baseline to actually mandate certain compliance requirements. So, for example, NIS2 in Europe, it's based on NIST framework, but that is actually a compliance regulation. So organizations have to kind of adhere to NIS2. That has some DNS elements. If you look at CMMC, that's also based on the NIST framework. Again, certain industries have to comply to certain regulations and compliance mandates. And a lot of those compliance mandates, for a lot of them, NIST is kind of the baseline, right? So they kind of leverage the NIST guidelines. So this kind of trickles into all those other mandates. And then I will say another example of market validation is Google recently announced back in April a DNS layer protection for their cloud workloads called Google DNS Armor. And that's a native offering that can protect Google Cloud workloads. And Infoblox's DNS-based threat detection is actually powering that engine, right? It's actually powering that solution in the back end. So, Google recognizes that DNS is a valuable security control point as well. So those are some examples of recent market validation, which kind of, is trying to put forth the point that don't ignore DNS as a major control point.
Right. So I'm curious, why should protective DNS be done on a DNS platform and not on, SASE platform?
So that's a good question. So you could do DNS, on, let's say, a next-gen firewall. There are some firewalls that offer kind of base level DNS-based filtering. There are, one or two SASE solutions that offer kind of some base level DNS filtering, again, DNS-based security. But what you want to do, so it's not about just doing protective DNS, it's about where you do protective DNS that matters, right? Anybody can do kind of checkbox DNS security. But if you're not doing it on a DNS platform, right? If you're not doing it on a recursive DNS resolver, you lose a lot of visibility, you lose a lot of threat detection that comes with being a DNS resolver. And so that's what Infoblox is, right? Infoblox is the only vendor that offers protective DNS on a DNS platform together with what's called DHCP and IP address management capabilities. Together, DNS, DHCP, and IP address management is called DDI. So Infoblox is the only vendor that offers this protective DNS on a DDI platform. This way, the team that owns DNS, which is usually like a DNS admin or network admin, should also own the troubleshooting aspects and protective DNS capability, because then you will know if something was blocked, you'll know exactly why it was blocked because your DNS platform is going to show you why it was blocked, right? It's easier to troubleshoot. It's easier to operationalize than if you're doing protective DNS on like a firewall or a SASE, because now the security team that kind of owns the firewalls and SASE, they have no idea why a DNS request was blocked. So they need to go back
Right.
and check what happened, and is it because of a security issue, or is it something else? The troubleshooting takes a lot longer. And the other thing I will say is DNS is the only infrastructure element in networks that is everywhere, right? So if you're working from home, your service provider DNS is servicing your DNS. If you're working in the office, you've got your internal enterprise DNS. If you're using cloud, you've got the cloud DNS. So DNS is everywhere where you're connecting to the internet, right? So if you're using protective DNS on your DNS platform, you get the broadest coverage and uniform protection across all those sites. Plus, I mentioned DHCP and IP address management. Together, that provides native visibility on assets that made that malicious request, right? You want to know, what asset made that DNS request to a suspicious or high-risk domain. And if you're not having that visibility with DNS and IPAM, all you get is an IP address, but you won't know what's behind the IP address. Is it somebody's asset? Is it a cloud workload? So to get that level of native visibility, you've got to do it on a DDI platform.
Got it. Okay, that's very helpful. Let's turn for a moment to discuss your new capabilities with detection mode, security workspace, and asset data integration. How do these features transform security operations from daily workflows to incident response and investigation?
Yeah, absolutely. So the product from Infoblox that does protective DNS is called Threat Defense. And this is like I said, a protected DNS product that's been around for many years. About 7-8 years, we've been protecting customers using DNS. And recently, we've added significant innovation to the product. Several innovations that we announced at Black Hat in August 2025. I'm just going to highlight a few of them, right? We talked about, I'm going to go in different order than what's shown on the slide, but let's look at security workspace. So generally what happens is security admins, when they're adopting a new solution, the UI is not very intuitive. They don't know what value they're getting from the product. It takes time to train them or to get trained and then figure out how their product is adding value, providing them value. What we did with the Threat Defense Security UI is we made that workspace so simplified and so intuitive that as soon as they log in, they set up the policy, they can immediately start to see what we're blocking, what's happening within the environment. Are they setting policies in the most optimal way? Are they blocking things and threats that they should be blocking? Things like that, right? Based on threat level and all the different aspects. So the workspace that we launched is, again, very easy for teams to understand without a lot of training, and they can immediately see what they're protecting as part of their preemptive security strategy, right? One example I will say is protection before impact. So I talked about 80-90% of DNS queries being blocked for our customers, malicious DNS queries being blocked for our customers at that first instance. And this protection before impact will show them exactly, what we blocked, what threats we blocked at that first DNS query. What are the assets behind those DNS queries? So the CISOs and security teams can take this, take this information to the board with clear quantifiable metrics on the threats that we've neutralized before impact, right? So that's a great, great example of how the workspace makes it more, showcases the value of the product easily for security teams. The other thing I will say on the detection mode is, let's say, customers are not ready to, put threat defense inline in their production environment. They want to try it out. We make it very easy to do a POC using what's called detection mode. They just have to deploy it in detection mode without changing their existing DNS or network infrastructure. It gets the logs from their existing DNS server, whatever they're using, and we can tell them what threats we would have blocked for them if they had us in line, but at least they get to see the detection that we make on their live production traffic without changing their network infrastructure. The The third thing is asset insights integration. I talked a lot about this, about knowing the asset behind the malicious DNS query. We've easily natively integrated our asset insights capability into threat defense, so security teams get instant visibility into what was protected, what made those malicious DNS requests, and so it helps with faster investigation for security teams. And then finally, tokens. Tokens is a way we are allowing the product to be used from a licensing perspective. Earlier, we used to have protected user-based licensing. Now we're offering a more flexible product usage-based licensing, and this helps align the licensing with the value delivered. It's by protected assets, right? And it helps customers also have a more flexible way to use the product.
Can we dig in a little bit more on the token-based pricing model, and how does this new pricing model reflect the current cybersecurity landscape?
Yeah, absolutely. So, economics of cybersecurity are changing, right? Everybody wants to know what's the ROI of the security investments they made last year, right? Companies are spending millions and millions of dollars on security, and the board wants to know, right? What's the ROI? They want to know, whether they're using the products they already purchased in the optimal way to get maximum value. And so and then, as their networks grow, as their environments grow, they need to make sure their security solution scales with that, right? So token-based licensing is all about providing that flexible product usage for customers, right? So if they want to so what they do is they purchase, a certain volume of security tokens from Infoblox, and they can use it for certain parts of threat defense. They can use it for certain, the core threat defense product, or they can use it for add-ons. We have a few add-ons to threat defense product. So if they can use some of the tokens to say, let's say they want to have like a lookalike domain detection and monitoring. They can add that using tokens. They have not used up their existing tokens. They can use their remaining tokens to get lookalike domain protection. If they're scaling, right, if their environment is growing, they want to add cloud workload protection to their threat defense monitoring and policy enforcement. Then they can, buy more tokens and then add cloud workload protection. It just makes it easier for the customer as they scale and as their business needs change. All they have to do is reallocate the tokens or buy more tokens, and they're good to go. They don't have to go through this really, complex SKUs and licensing kind of, traditional legacy ways. Yeah.
Got it. That makes sense. So I guess taking a step back, where do you see the future of cybersecurity today?
Yeah. I just want to go back to the first thing we discussed right at the beginning of this video, which is kind of traditional detect and respond approaches, waiting for a patient zero, and then protecting all the other organizations. That is too reactive in today's day and age of AI-based threats. Threat actors are evolving. They're getting more sophisticated. They're getting more stealthy. They're, using single-use malware, right? And so the traditional detect and respond is not going to work. The market is looking for something more preemptive, right? And that could be something around a more predictive threat intelligence, for example, that can tell them, these indicators, they're not malicious yet. They could be malicious in the future based on how how those domains look. They are also looking at attack surface management, right? That's also part of preemptive. Are you looking at from outside in? Are you seeing, what vulnerabilities exist on a company's network? Inside out, right? Being more preemptive in your overall security strategy, which also includes protective DNS, I think is the future. Because like I said before, reactive is not working, and we can't keep up with the AI-based threats to get ahead of them. And then the second thing I will say from a trends perspective for the future is consolidation, right? And we've heard this a couple of years now. CISOs want to consolidate what they have onto a few platforms for security, right? They don't want to deal with 40, 50 different security tools on their network, having to manage it, license it and all of that. Consolidation continues to be a trend. And, a DDI platform is one of those platforms that helps consolidate your DNS protocol serving capabilities, asset management and asset visibility capabilities, and your protective DNS capabilities. You're able to consolidate all of that into one platform, which aligns with the trend of tech stack consolidation.
Awesome. Thanks again for joining me today, Krupa. For viewers who want to learn more about Infoblox's offerings, where should they go?
Yeah, so absolutely go to the website. There's tons of information on the product itself, but also our research, our threat intel team is very unique. They're finding new things like traffic distribution systems, malicious ad tech, and they're publishing a lot of research on these new threat actors and their new kind of ways of working. And so there's a wealth of information on our Infoblox Threat Intel microsite on our website. And you can always subscribe to updates as we publish more research. So definitely, I think the website and the microsite is a great place to start.
Great. Well, thanks again, Krupa.
Thank you.